Let's now bring in SABC International News Editor Sophie Mokoena to discuss these elections. Thank you so much for your time, Sophie, and good afternoon to you. So up to 1 million voters were eligible in these elections. We saw, of course, those snaking queues at some polling stations. Let's start perhaps with the latest in relation to counting of the results.
Well, what we are told is that the local government ballots have been counted, and it looks like the opposition has done very well by gaining many seats at local government election, and particularly in relation to councillors. And therefore, if this trend is holding, we expect the opposition to perform well in terms of their national seats, and therefore that would mean a new president for that country. But judging from the results of the local level, where you have councillors, you can see that the UDC is winning with a huge margin. And therefore, that speaks to perhaps the view and the feeling on the ground of people of Botswana.
And I actually did want to engage you on, what is making the umbrella for democratic change come out this strongly for elections. We do know, of course, that some are describing these elections as very tense. They're also saying that this is perhaps due to the shifting of the political landscape.
Often we talk about the youth on the continent and the youth vote, and young people who are disgruntled because they have been left out of the economic benefits, and therefore they are expressing themselves. When you look at this party, the UDC, its leader, 54 years old, but supported by young people. And therefore, the young people were able to be volunteers and galvanized the communities, including in the rural countryside, to go and vote. Secondly, you had a problem between the current president, Masisi, and the former president, Khama. And Khama, coming from the royal family in that country, from the Khama family, you know them, he's the chief of Vanuatu. And therefore, there was this view that you are terrorizing the chief. And therefore, elderly people may not have been able to express themselves publicly how they felt about that standoff, but this was brewing. That is why the party that was supported by Khama the last elections, even though this time around he was not that vocal, also performed well in certain areas, particularly in the rural countryside. And therefore the vote of the governing party was divided, and that led to the opposition performing well. The other issue is the economic situation in Botswana. We always talk about poverty being a ticking time bomb, either causing restlessness that leads to political and security instability, or this is how people will express themselves. And Botswana took a decision not to resort to conflict or perhaps security instability, but exercise their right in terms of sending a strong message how they feel on the ground.
I want to now talk about, how others are viewing this election. You mentioned the former president of Botswana, Khama. Just talk to us about, and the fact that, of course, he's in the past endorsed other opposition parties during last elections. In this particular election, do we know what was his view or preferred parties, especially given the sense that you've just been talking to us now in terms of the dynamics of the country and what it's facing at the moment?
He played a role in the formation of the party that he supported in the last election, much as he was not campaigning for this party when he went back to Botswana, because you'd recall a few months ago he went back to Botswana and decided to settle back in the countryside. the home village and announced that he is now going to focus on traditional issues as the chief of Bangwato. And even just a day before elections, he announced that he's not going to be involved in politics. But as soon as elections are over, he is going to focus on his role as the chief. And therefore, those kind of statements also speaks to, he didn't really want to endorse the governing party, and he has left the governing party, we know. But you'll find that you continue to engage with those leaders who are leading this party that he founded after leaving Botswana. And you know that we spoke to him many times while he was here in South Africa, where he expressed his view that he is going to ensure that President Mokoena doesn't see a second term. So much as this was not now public, something was happening, and clearly he's got a good relationship with Advocate Duma Boko. It's not, even though he's got a particular party that he supported in the last elections, but they do have a good relationship.
And as we wrap, Sophie, perhaps just give us an understanding in terms of when can we expect these official results to be out?
I spoke to Advocate Duma Bokwe 30 minutes ago. He indicated that they expect the results later today. He even indicated that swearing in will be quick for whoever is the incoming president, and then the issues of inauguration will come much later. So I don't know whether that might be derailed by court challenges, but I get a sense also from him that he spoke to President Mokoena this morning, not directly on the phone, but with messages. And I can't see any hurdle whether, whichever way the final results go, between the two. And then I think we will get a sense later today, but we'll continue to monitor the situation. He did promise that he is going to send us a recording later today, Duma Boko. His voice is gone, I think, because of the noise. You know, when we are talking, we are lobbying, you know, with all the elections and fatigue. And I think in that message that we are going to get later, it will be at a time where he's convinced in terms of the performance of his party. We are also monitoring the social media and platform of the president of Botswana, Mokoena, to see whether he might post something that might give an indication in terms of what's happening. In relation to the Electoral Commission in Botswana, the Electoral Commission of Botswana has been criticized for supporting the governing party. And it's very difficult to get them to speak to us, because I think now they are dealing with a very difficult situation.
All right, let me ask you this final question, because you did mention social media. I know that you're monitoring a number of elections. With Botswana's almost out of the way, we're all watching the US elections. I mean, these are very important elections. Very quickly, Sophie, just give us what we can expect. What are the critical issues?
Well, what we can expect next week is, whichever way, it's going to be history. If it's Kamala Harris, the first woman to lead the United States of America, the most powerful country. Secondly, if it is Donald Trump, a big story there in terms of his views on Russia, on China, including the continent. For us, it gets even more critical because, as you know, that South Africa will be hosting the G20 next year. The G20 is constituted of these powerful nations, America being one. And of course, America is the incoming G20 after us. And therefore, the question is, if it is Donald Trump who win election, or who's going to win the election, is he going to come to the continent? As you know, his views on Africa. And if it's Kamala Harris, I can guarantee you she is going to come. We will see the Air Force One landing in South Africa during the G20.
Well, those elections happening on the 5th of November, that's next week, Wednesday. Thank you so much, Sophie, for giving us that analysis on those elections. Of course, Sophie Mokoena is international news editor here at the SABC.